Charli XCX's influence has been phenomenal this year because everyone's talking about her album Brat. More specifically, we've adopted this vibe into the season of the Brat, a Brat Summer if you will. And if you're not chronically online like I am, let me quickly explain to you what Brat Summer means. It's an aesthetic defined by party animal antics, this cool girl style of smudged eyeliner and not caring and partying until 5 AM. However, more generally, it evokes feelings of teenage girl angst, accepting your imperfections and embracing chaos. Charli herself even explained the trend to mean a girl who is a bit messy, sometimes does dumb things, and who is just very honest and blunt. And I thought to jump on the bandwagon and give you book recommendations that just scream Brat. I'm going to be telling you about what these books are about and why I think you should read them. And if you're new to the channel and you haven't seen me before, hello, I am Katerina. Welcome. And if this is the sort of content you like, why not consider subscribing? I talk a lot about books. That being said, let's get into the video. The very first book recommendation I have, which just honestly screams Brat, is I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel. This novel plunges into the chaotic world of our unnamed female protagonist, and it's a story of obsession as she's in love with a guy who doesn't really love her back. Honey, we've all been there. However, she's equally as obsessed with this guy's wife and also another girl he's seeing who is also an influencer. This book also has heavy themes of our current digital age where online personas can be almost as impactful as real life ones. This story is also one of self-discovery as she grapples with the complexities of living as a woman in today's society. What begins as a candid exploration into fandom and celebrity worship spirals into a darkly comedic tale of messy girl angst. This novel is so Brat-coded to me as it's really a journey of a raw and vulnerable girl who is on a relentless journey for identity and who she is amidst the noise of social media. And I feel like it's really relatable as there is just so much anxiety and confusion around just existing in a modern world, but also how you seem to brand yourself online. And this book for me was really comforting as it really confronts these inner doubts and thoughts head on. It's just an incredible novel of connection and recognition and just living in a world where yearning things and just desiring certain things that you want can come across as embarrassing or cringe. It's a candid reflection of the turmoil and intensity of this young woman's psyche laid bare for the reader to witness. I also really adored this novel for the main character being a woman of colour, which I just think adds another level of complexity to her existence in the UK, which I honestly just think is now more relevant than ever, especially with all these far-right riots going on, which is just, to be honest, really scary. But all in all, this book is such a slay, and it was genuinely one of my favorite books that I read this year. I just think it has fabulous societal commentary and it just examines the everyday realities of what it's like being a girl. The next book I have on my list that I just think is an absolute slay and incredibly Brat is My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa Moshfegh. This is a satirical novel that also follows a unnamed female protagonist, but this one lives in New York. And even though this girl honestly seems to have just like the perfect privileged life, she's also dealing with a lot of trauma with the death of her parents and just dissatisfaction at her job, and she therefore attempts to escape reality by sleeping for one whole year, a sort of extended hibernation. And the book delves into the life of the privileged, critiquing superficiality and just the emptiness of the upper class. Yet it's also a journey of self-discovery as she confronts her inner demons and the pain that she's been trying to numb. I feel like this book is a hit or miss for some people, but I just think if you get it, you get it. I absolutely love this book and I've actually read it twice because that's how much I enjoyed it. The main character's quest for rest and renewal actually becomes funny in like a dark comedy way as she ends up doing some really weird things. And I'm not gonna lie, her desire to just connect from the world and isolate herself seems actually quite attractive and a little bit relatable. It definitely resonated with me as someone who just wants to get off the relentless treadmill of life and just hit pause. And whilst the main character is not a party girl, although she did used to be, this narrative is very rich in Brat-like behaviour, as I kind of feel like this character's self-indulgent behaviour of just wanting to sleep all the time can also be seen as like a form of rebellion against societal expectations from her. And this book also really nicely touches upon the complexities of being a woman and the struggle of finding meaning in a very superficial society. I just genuinely adored her absolutely unhinged behaviour and just how she handled everything so brutally and honestly. This sort of character I honestly just feel is like the embodiment of Brat, and I just absolutely loved it. Okay, the next book on my list is a little bit of a weird one, but in my opinion, I think that this is Brat. And the next book on my list is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. Oh, the joys of being on the internet and comparing Charli XCX's album with a renowned literature classic. What a time to be alive. This is a semi-autobiographical novel set in New York in the 1950s, and it takes a deep dive into the fragmented mind of a young woman. And it's a descent into mental illness as she grapples with societal expectations and her own ambitions. Throughout the novel, the main character's disillusionment with her future and ambitions grow, ultimately leading towards a breakdown. And as she deals with identity and depression and the pursuit of recovery in the face of societal norms, she essentially then feels trapped in this oppressive bell jar of her mental illness and external constraints from society. Despite this book being written almost like 60 years ago, it is wild that it is still relatable to girls today. And to be honest, it is also a little bit depressing that we're still facing these issues. Oh, the joys of being a woman. And whilst I would argue that gender roles were probably more rigid back then, there are parallels within the pressure in society on girls, along with the painfully relatable narrative of the anxiety and confusion of simply existing as a girl. This book just feels incredibly Brat, with this raw and vulnerable story of disconnection and just trying to find your place in this confusing world. However, it is kind of weirdly comforting knowing that this has been a struggle amongst many girls across different generations, because it kind of makes you feel less alone. At least for me it did anyway, although it is kind of shocking how there has been no progress. But anyway, this book is just very Brat, and RIP Sylvia Plath, you would have absolutely loved this album. Another author I think just writes absolutely Brat novels is Elena Ferrante, and I personally think her most Brat book is The Days of Abandonment. This story is set in Italy, where our main character faces the sudden departure of her husband, and within the four walls of her apartment, she's left on her own to deal with these intense and disorientating emotions of being essentially abandoned by her husband after he leaves her for a much younger woman. The novel is a deep dive into her psychological descent, as she tries to maintain normalcy for her children whilst also wrestling with an identity crisis. The narrative is a raw and visceral depiction of a woman's struggle, and it's also an examination on the complexities of love, motherhood, and the spectre of madness that looms over the Forsaken. This is another book that I read recently that's just become one of my favourites of this year, as I honestly just thought it was perfect. It's just such a brutal and clear look on the honestly ugly aspects of emotionally hurt women that we so rarely see. Usually we see depictions of emotionally hurt women having very romanticized breakdowns where they're almost a bit of a muse and you should be admiring them. Whereas this book just throws all that out the window and it shows the very raw and intense versions of women having breakdowns. And similar to Ottessa Moshfegh's writing, this writing style is just so unhinged and honest that it honestly is comedic. This woman just absolutely spirals and fumes over her husband that left her, and then also obsesses with this younger woman that he chose. And whilst I've personally never had a husband that's left me, this book is weirdly relatable because it really captures this existential dread and confusion that can accompany any major life upheaval. This book is just a profound and perfect read of an unapologetic woman just struggling to regain her sense of self. And I could definitely imagine this protagonist just running around her apartment screaming Brat lyrics at the top of her lungs. For my next book, I was going to mention My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante, as I do think that this book is just incredibly bratty, but I feel like I talk about this book so often on my channel because it's one of my favorites, so I'm gonna pick another book instead because I want to include something new. So the next book on my list is also an Ottessa Moshfegh book, but this one is Eileen. This is a story of a young woman who feels very trapped in her life, both emotionally and environmentally, as she's kind of stuck in a small town. And she works in a prison as a receptionist, I think, or some sort of office job, and she begins to obsess over her co-worker, who is a very glamorous lady, and in doing so she then begins to fantasize and imagine having a different life. And also at home she's a carer for her alcoholic father, which kind of adds more layers to the resentment and self-neglect. And whilst this seems like a novel of just like a mundane girl, it also has elements of crime involved and just a desperate bid for a fresh start. This novel therefore explores themes in self-image, the desire for change, and the impactful expectations that are placed on women. Similar to the others, I do think that this is another journey of self-discovery, as our main character really confronts her inner darkness, and she really mulls over the possibility of liberation from her bleak existence. I personally think that this book is full of brat-like behaviour, as she's very much in defiance with her current life and she's yearning for change from her current surroundings. It captures this painfully relatable existential dread that comes from a life when you're just about on the cusp of change. Like, you're sick of your life at the moment, but you're ready for the next thing and you're just trying to bridge that gap. And it's very much an account of this girl's raw thoughts, as she's just very disappointed in a life that was just so different from one that she imagined for herself. And in stereotypical moshfegh fashion, this book is just full of weird and unhinged behavior that I absolutely love. Again, I feel like this novel is a bit of a hit and miss for some people, but I absolutely adored it, and definitely one I think it should be on the BRAT Summer list. Okay, similar to the bell jar, this next book may also seem like a weird inclusion, but this also kind of felt brat to me, and that's I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. This is a haunting Belgian dystopian novel, and it's narrated by a woman whose only life she's ever known is being locked in a bunker with 39 other women when she was a child by an unknown captor. She therefore has no other memories apart from being held captive. However, by pure chance, all these women manage to escape the bunker. However, they have to then navigate an unknown world all by themselves. And our main character therefore has to grapple with completely new concepts such as freedom, identity, and solitude. I included this book for many reasons, but mainly because this is a story about women who have been stripped of their identity and their past, and they're struggling to find meaning and identity in the current world they're in. And it also has this brat-like rebellion from our main character, and she has a desire for knowledge and push out of the constraints of her current environment. She's on a mission for identity, purpose, and understanding of a world that only seems to give her more questions rather than answers. And despite this book's apocalyptic setting, I personally felt like it was weirdly relatable, as it kind of echoed this anxiety and confusion that seems to fester in living with a world that feels so vast but also limiting at the same time. It also just has really powerful commentary into the nature of humanity, and as a whole will just lead you into an existential crisis. But to be honest, nothing feels more brat than questioning the messy chaos in your life, and that's why I included the book here. For my next book, this feels like the raw essence of crazy girl angst, and that's Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. This novel follows a girl from Newcastle who works as a provocative photographer, and she scouts men and takes photos of them in very unsettling but erotic poses. However, things start to get messy when the line between consent and coercion begins to blur, and as her personal demons and professional pressures begin to collide, she just seems to spiral out of control. The book confronts themes of gender and the female gaze against all this backdrop of past trauma. And for me, this book just felt very brat, as it explores photography and art and what it means for a woman to identify as an artist. And what begins as a confident exploration into feminist art just seems to spiral into self-destruction and angst. It's a journey marked by her vulnerable search for meaning in a world that seems to fetishize her vision. And she seems to be on this relentless quest for control whilst also dealing with the chaos in her life. I feel like it also embodies this anxiety in a society that seems to commodify women's bodies and their artistic expression. And it's just also an interesting exploration of where the line between empowerment and vulnerability becomes super thin. And I'll be totally honest, I was quite lukewarm about this book when I finished reading it, and I think it's because it was just so hyped up to me. I saw that people were describing it as a female American Psycho, which I do think is just quite inaccurate. However, I do know that so many people love this book, and I did really want to include it because I do generally feel that this book is very brat. And finally, the very last brat book I have for you is Bunny by Mona Arwood. This is a novel that follows a girl who is a scholarship student at a very prestigious university, and on her course she becomes very entangled with this other group of girls. These girls all look the same, move the same, sound the same, talk the same, and they all call each other Bunny. Our main character at first is very confused and put off by them, but then she's slowly lured into their group. And the more she becomes intertwined with them, the more she begins to lose her grip on reality, and therefore the lines between friendship and manipulation begin to blur. And she then becomes stuck in their sinister and cultish world where they begin to perform bizarre rituals with men. Again, this book is very much about a girl trying to find her place in the world to belong, as our main character is very lonely and she attempts to insert herself in this group of girls. And this inner conflict and desire just lead her down many rabbit holes, wink wink, of surreal experiences. I swear I get less funny on this channel with every passing day. Anyway, this book also captures what it's like to try and fit into a group whilst also trying to maintain your own individuality, which I think pretty much every girl can relate to. This was something I definitely struggled with in my teenage years. And this book in general does seem to capture this sometimes toxic element that some female friendships can have. Plus, the Brat album is very heavy on drugs and substance abuse. And this book just has a weird plot, and it's full of hallucinations and imagining things, and it kind of genuinely feels like you're on something whilst you're reading it. And I will be totally honest, like with the last book, I didn't love it, but I liked it. I was just personally a bit underwhelmed. However, I know so many people that love Bunny, and I think I am in the minority with this book, so I still wanted to include it because I think you might enjoy it as well. And those are all the Brat coded books I have to recommend to you. Have you read any of these books? If you have, what did you think of them? And if not these books, what books do give you Brat vibes? Thanks so much for watching this video and listening to me yap about Brat's books. If you liked it, please drop a like down below. It really helps my channel out. And if you're new here, please subscribe. I make new videos every Tuesday, and therefore you can see more bizarre content like this. Feel free to also follow my Instagram. I post a bit more personal stuff on there, but I also post about books as soon as I finish reading them, so you can see what I've rated them out of 10 and also what they're about. Feel free to also add me as a friend on Goodreads. I recently made an account, so it's quite still fresh and new, but please show me some love on there and I will try and write more reviews. And again, thank you so much for being here and watching me dribble on about books, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!